Doomed by fate to lead a hectic life, Lemuel Gulliver again set off on a voyage on the adventure ship 2 months after returning home. But as soon as the ship passed the Strait of Madagascar, a storm overtook it. Strong gusts of wind carried the ship to an unknown land. When the sailors saw the land, they decided to inspect it and collect fresh water. Gulliver went down to the shore with the sailors, and the crew scattered across the island. Not finding water, Gulliver decided to return to the shore. But as soon as he approached the ocean, he saw that the sailors had abandoned him. They were sailing away in full sail from the huge giant who was chasing them. Frightened, Gulliver rushed into the interior of the island. He ran to a barley field with huge ears and realized that he was in the land of giants. Gulliver sat down to rest. But before he had time to catch his breath, he noticed a huge foot that was about to step on him. Gulliver started screaming as loudly as he could. And the giant noticed him. He lifted Gulliver with his hand, examined him intently, and carried the little man to the owner farmer. The farmer tried to speak to Gulliver, but his voice was so loud that it deafened the little man. Then the owner brought Gulliver home. At the house, the farmer's family was preparing for dinner. The little man was seated on a table where gigantic pieces of beef and bread lay. But before Gulliver had time to break off his bread, the farmer's son grabbed it upside down and began to shake it. He mistook Gulliver for a toy and tried to put it in his mouth. Then the father loudly threatened his son and asked him to treat the little man more carefully. Later, the farmer's 9-year-old daughter made a bed for Gulliver, sewed clothes for him, and even taught him the language of the giants. The girl gave Gulliver the name Grildrig, which meant dwarf. He called her a nanny. Gulliver aroused great interest among other giants, so the farmer began to show him at fairs for money. But frequent performances undermined Gulliver's health. Then the farmer happily sold the little man to the queen. So Gulliver moved to the palace and became the darling of the royal family. However, the court dwarf, who was no longer considered the smallest man in the kingdom, disliked Gulliver and ruined his life in every possible way. Once, when Gulliver was strolling through the garden, the dwarf began to cower the apple tree. And Gulliver had to escape from the falling giant apples.
Oh no!
And on another occasion, an agile dwarf pushed Gulliver into a huge jug of cream. And only the cook, who entered on time, saved the little man from inevitable death. But it wasn't just because of the dwarf that Gulliver got into trouble. So one morning during breakfast he was grabbed by the cook monkey. Like a cub, she began to rock Gulliver and then dragged him to the roof. The giants rushed to save the little man. And as soon as they climbed onto the roof, the monkey threw Gulliver off. Fortunately, he managed to catch onto the shingles and was safely rescued. In general, Gulliver's life in the kingdom was happy. He often accompanied the queen on her travels. They even made a special travel box for him. And once on another such trip, the servant brought the box with Gulliver out to the sea so that the little man could enjoy the fresh air. But then a shadow began to flicker over Gulliver's head. A sea eagle flying past noticed prey in a box. He grabbed the ring on the lid of the chest with his beak and carried Gulliver over the ocean. At some point, the bird released the box, and the captive found himself in the open sea. Gulliver barely managed to open the top hatch. He started shouting and waving his handkerchief. Finally, he was spotted from the ship and helped to get out. So, after all the adventures, Gulliver returned to England again. For a long time, he could not get used to objects and people of normal size. And Gulliver's wife, frightened that he had gone mad, strictly forbade her husband to think about traveling.